The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. Before we proceed to counsel for Mr. Kyo Sompon to continue posing questions to the witness, Mr. International Court Prosecutor, you're on your feet. You may now proceed.
Mr. President, I just wanted to give you, please, an update on the matter we spoke of earlier. The original of the document that we were speaking of earlier has been located. It's strictly speaking a confidential document. Can we please ask for your permission, Mr. President, for that to be released later today to Mr. Kim Won?
The President, indeed, you are allowed to do that.
I'm grateful. Thank you.
The President, we would like now to hand over to counsel for Mr. Kyo Sompon to continue posing questions to the witness. Counsel, could you also please be reminded concerning the time allocation with the other two teams when putting the question? Counsel for Mr. Kyo Sompon. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Kim Won, before we broke, I put a question concerning Mr. Kyo Sompon accompanying some like in the countryside. My question to you now is, when you saw him at that time, was Mr. Kyo Sompon traveling, or was he in an event you attended? Response. To the best of my recollection, I already stated clearly time and again that I met him by chance. I had never been with him in the period of 3 years of the Khmer Rouge regime. I saw him in a vehicle and I recognized him as Mr. Kyo Sompon because my belief was substantiated by my colleagues. We went into a group. We went all together in a group of photographers who took pictures in the area surrounding Phnom Penh. I did not know what Kyo Sompon was doing back then, but I was assigned to take a few more pictures to fill in my needed text for the information, and I met him accidentally, so I had no other knowledge of where he went or was heading to or what he did there. I did not see his face and I did not know where he was traveling to as indicated. Counsel, thank you. I wish to repeat the question for some clarification. Did you see him when he was traveling in the vehicle, or you see him in a parked car? Response. At that time, he was in a moving vehicle. And normally, when senior leaders went somewhere, they would be in convoy, escorted by bodyguards. Counsel, thank you. Could you also tell us if you remember the location where you saw him? Response. At that time, I went to the outskirts of Phnom Penh, but I cannot recall which location it was, although I am very sure that it was located outside of Phnom Penh. It's part of the countryside already, and this happened a very long time ago. I think it was more than 20 years. I'm afraid I cannot really recollect this very well. Counsel, thank you. So, you testify that you saw him in the outskirts of Phnom Penh. Is that correct? Please repeat your question because the mic was not on when you responded. Response. Yes, it is correct. Counsel. Thank you. With regard to some Dach Au, did you know his function or standing back then? Response. When I was in Phnom Penh, I learned that he was the state presidium of the CPK. Counsel, thank you. What about his authority? Did the former king have any power at all according to your knowledge? Response. I did not take good notice of this or analyzed his roles or functions. I was not clear whether he enjoyed any power, but I believe that he was not different from Khieu Samphan concerning his authority. Counsel, could you please be more precise on this? Be more precise on what you said that when it comes to the power of the king. Response. I was saying that in the context of authority, the king enjoyed the same little power as Khieu Samphan did. So my belief is that he did not have power like Mr. Khieu Samphan did not have it. Counsel, thank you. But how did you know Mr. Khieu Samphan was the successor of then Prince Norodom Sihanouk in the state presidium position? Response. I learned about this by chance as well. I learned about this when I worked in office as 27. I learned from the foreign language printed materials. And I then did not know whether the former king resigned or not. I just learned from the leaflet printed at that office office 27. So I learned from the document. This information was not broadcast or informed to me. I learned about this on my own. And at that time, I analyzed that the king had genuinely resigned, and it was possible that Mr. Khieu Samphan could take up this position from him. Counsel. In respect of Khieu Samphan succession, I mean his position after the then Prince Norodom Sihanouk. According to your knowledge, did you ever hear or note any appointment of any individual in the period? Response. Information concerning any appointment of Mr. Kyosampon was not made known to me. I learned about this information only by chance during my course of working at the office. Counsel. Thank you. Did you ever know whether Mr. Kyosampon had ever issued any orders to any of the officers during the period? Response. I don't know the detailed information about this, but I can see from my judgment of Mr. Kyosampon's personality, when I lived with him, he had never rendered any orders or appointed anything which negatively impact on the forces or immorally impacting the forces. So that was my speculation. That was my surmise. I believe that Kyosampon could have never done any wrongdoing. Counsel. Thank you. Concerning the removal, promotion, or disciplinary sanction imposed on any member of the CPK, were you ever aware of any decision that could have been rendered or that might have been rendered by Mr. Kyosampon? Response. I think I heard from Mr. Thuch Run, who was the Secretary of State for the Ministry of Information of the CPK, who is now passed away, who talked to me about the allegations against him during the CPK period. He stated that by chance, Mr. Kyosampon learned about these allegations and tried to save him when he was in Kampong Saum. But that was part of his fairy tale that he talked to me, his own story that he communicated to me about this. Counsel, thank you. I would like you to clarify a few things. You said that the person told you the story about his life. This story has some connection to the next question concerning the sanctions or disciplinary actions that might be imposed by Mr. Kyosampon as the chairman of the State Presidium onto his subordinates. Response. I wish to give you an example. Whether Mr. Kyosampon had power or no power, I already analyzed that he had no power at all. I was talking about Thuch Run, not Chuk Run, as you indicated. Thuch Run was a revolutionary. During the CPK period, he was assigned to work in Kampong Saum and later on was alleged. But by chance, Mr. Kyosampon learned about this, as he said, and Mr. Kyosampon helped save him. And I think that story was part of my reflection of how Khieu Samphan had power or not, because as a person who had no authority, he could never save someone, because if I say he could have saved that person, that means he could have enjoyed some level of authority already. Counsel, thank you for your correction, and I would like to proceed to another question as a matter of clarification. You said that Mr. Thuch Rin told you about Mr. Khieu Samphan trying to save him. Can you recall what kind of problem that person encountered that needed Mr. Khieu Samphan's assistance? Response. I believe that people in Kampong Sam were alleged or were accused of some wrongdoings. Counsel, thank you. I would like now to move to another topic about your work, about your career as a photographer who went to the countryside to take some photos, and you met or you talked about the white Khmer or Khmer Saw who created chaotic situation during the Khmer Rouge regime. And you also mentioned about the old base of the CPK, in which you stated that you were not allowed by Mr. Kai Pok to go there, capture some new coverage, because that area was conquered by the white Khmer. At that time, Mr. Co-Prosecutor interrupted, and you could not finish your story of that account. My question is to you now. Could you tell the chamber about your impression concerning the movement of the Khmer Saw or the white Khmer? Response. I wish to classify this into two. During the 5-year war period, I was at B-20. I heard the bombs being dropped, the gunfires. And during the 3-year period, I received indirect information. I never heard directly about this. I only heard that we were not allowed to go back to the former base, the base in the Bang Lavia location along the Chinit River, because that location was in Kampong Cham vicinity, and I wished to go to that location to know whether people could be moving back to live at that location after the war, because these locations were the places where I used to live and go about during my time. I asked the head of the North Zone for permission to go there to check out the information, but I was stopped because they said that there were Khmer Saw there that could prevent me from doing so. Counsel, thank you, Mr. Kumwon. That was my last question already. I have no further questions to put to you, and I thank you very much indeed. I would like now to cede the floor to the international co-lawyer for my team. The President, thank you, and Council, you may now proceed.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Mr. Kim Voon. My name is Anta Gise. I am International Co-Counsel for Mr. Kyo Sampan, and I would like to put a few questions to you for purposes of clarification following the questions asked by my learned colleague. Let me remind you that you should make sure you answer the questions only when your microphone is on. This is my first question. When you were interviewed by OCIJ investigators on the 25th of July 2009, and it is document E3/380, the French ERN is as follows: 00485429, and the Khmer ERN is 00357-196, and the English ERN is 00365641. The first question put to you by the investigators in this document was as follows: when did you join the revolution? And you said that your father was a pro-Samdek Sihanouk Khmer Isarak official. My question is whether the fact that your father was a pro-Sihanouk official contributed to your commitment vis-à-vis the front.
Response. There were several factors that made me join the revolution. At that time, Cambodia was in difficult situation. If we looked into the sky, there would be airplanes. If we look at the infantry, we could see the soldiers were all infantry combatants, and we saw all kinds of airplanes, the planes from the Turkey, from the American troops. In my village, some family perished because of the aerial bombardments. So we had suffered a great deal from this, and we supported the former king. My villagers and I and my family never wanted the war. We wanted peace. And I remember there was a statement. At that time, the statement was broadcast on radio, although there was very few radio stations. We listened to the Peking radio broadcast and also to the Voice of America. And we had to listen to the radio broadcast. I could make myself listen to the radio broadcast and started to love the former king. And we heard the appeal by the king concerning the Maki jungle, and we heard about the demonstration and how demonstrators were treated, where demonstrators were shot to death at the Chroy Chongwa location. People were badly treated in the demonstration in Kampot province, and we also noted that people could be displaced. First, we joined with the Vietnamese troop from Hanoi to join the demonstrations. I just reflect this to make sure you understand the full picture, how I was convinced to join the revolution, and we were still loyal to the king, still supported the king, and my elder brothers also agreed in principle that we should do our best to make sure that the king be installed as the president, be back in power. And also we would like Mr. Khieu Samphan and Hu Nam and Hu Yun to be leading this movement. I am an orphan, and I found it difficult to leave my mother behind to join the revolution.
Je suis désolée, Monsieur le témoin.
I am sorry, witness, to have aroused in you sad memories. Please let me know when you'll be ready to answer my next question.
Vous êtes en état de poursuivre?
Witness, are you in a position to continue?
The President, Mr. Kum Won, do you think you can proceed to answer a few more questions? Response, yes, Mr. President, I can proceed to respond to more questions. The President, Council, you may now proceed.
Thank you, witness. Earlier, when you answered my colleague, you said that the period during which you met Khieu Samphan in the Maquis was around 1971. And you specified, when you were answering a question from the co-prosecutor, that back then you had seen Khieu Samphan bring food to the printing house in which you were working. So my first question is, do you know what were Mr. Khieu Samphan's duties within the front back then?
Vous allez bien, Monsieur?
Are you feeling okay, witness?
Yes, I can continue.
Would you like me to put the question to you again, or do you have it in mind?
Je vais la reposer.
I will put it to you again. So I was asking you, witness, if in 1971, when you saw Khieu Samphan in the Maquis, if you knew what his duties were within the front.
Back then, to my understanding, he could be someone in the position just down below Prince Norodom Sihanouk. So his role was within the leadership rank in leading the people to struggle. That was my understanding of that situation at the time.
And during the time when you were in the Maquis, did you often see leaders, or in any case, people who held positions within the front bring food to your section?
As I stated in my earlier statements, yes, there was, and there were messengers other than those leaders. There were messengers who brought in vegetables and other foodstuff.
There might have been a slight problem in the translation, so let me ask this again. You just told me that there were messengers bringing food and food supplies, and you said to the co-prosecutor when you answered his question that Khieu Samphan had come to bring food to the printing house in which you were working. And as Khieu Samphan was not a messenger, can you tell me if people other than messengers would bring food and food supplies?
As I said earlier, the leaders normally motivated us to work, so they normally brought along with them foodstuff and food supplies and sweet. And sweet in this context was nothing other than banana planted in B20. Normally when they visited us, they would bring along with them a bundle of bananas. But generally, the foodstuff were brought in with foodstuff. But what I noted at that time was that Mr. Khieu Samphan went to visit the printing house, and whenever he went there, he also brought along with him the messenger. We, at that time, never addressed each other. Well, at that time, we regarded each other as brothers and sisters. We normally address somebody who was more senior as brother. So he brought foodstuff for us, and other than him, the messenger also brought in food supply for us.
Thank you for this clarification. And since we are on the topic of messengers, you said earlier in your testimony before the chamber that you would receive statements through messengers most often, statements from leaders that were printed, or to print, corrects the interpreter. So do you remember the name of some of these messengers?
There were fairly many members of messengers. At some point, some brought in the food, Sin, Tương, Thiet, and several others. They were from the ethnic minorities, and they worked as messengers. I cannot recall them all.
And did you know if they were messengers who were specially accredited or especially assigned to transport messages, mail?
The main task of the messenger was to courier letters from the superiors or from the leaders to us. So most of the time when they came in with the documents or letters or so, they normally brought along with us some food stuff, because in our place we could not go anywhere and we relied on the food supply from outside.
Earlier, when you answered a question from my colleague, you told us that you were able to recognize Khieu Samphan's writing style in his statements, and you gave some clarification in this regard. And regarding another point you brought up with the prosecutor, I would like to know, and this relates again to the statements you would receive to print, I would like to have some more clarification on this. You said to the prosecutor, and this is after 17 April 1975, because you were telling the prosecutor, describing your work with Revolutionary Flag, and when you answered one of his questions, you explained that you were able to recognize Pol Pot's annotations on documents that had to be used for Revolutionary Flag. So my question is, how were you able to recognize Pol Pot's annotations? Were you familiar with his handwriting?
But I recognized it clearly.
So when you say recognize, that means that you had seen the original copy at least once. So I would like to know how you were led to recognize Pol Pot's handwriting.
As I mentioned about my work at the printing house, there were 3 sections. I was in charge of the publication of magazines, but in one printing house, it serviced the 3 sections: the front magazine and the Revolutionary magazine was printed in that printing house. But for the front affairs, it was my responsibility, as Chung was responsible for Revolutionary Flag. And normally in the article, in each article, there was a code number. That code number was there in order to identify that it was the editorial, or it was the statement by the leaders, or it was the ordinary article or commentary or so. But as for the leaders, there was no speech or statement of the leaders. There was no code number attached to it at all. There was only an annotation, handwritten annotation from the leader beside the text, and that can be easily recognized by people over there, because it came quite often, so we could recognize as to which that annotation or whose that annotation belonged to. That is my response to your question.
Thank you for this clarification. I have a last topic to question you on. relating to the trips you took, especially the trips you described before the investigators of the OCIJ, and I'm referring again to document E3/380. And the French ERN, or in French it's on the last page, and I suppose it's the same for the other versions. In French ERN it is 00485-434. Khmer ERN 00357-201. And also to the following page, 00357-202, therefore, and English, 00365-646. And I would like to have some clarification, because when you answered my colleague, and also when you answered the co-prosecutor, if I remember well, you said that you had only seen Khieu Samphan once with Prince Sihanouk. You say that you only met him once. However, in your statement, and I will quote, this is what you say, or in any case, this is what is noted in the record. It's towards the end of the first paragraph, and you say, I saw Khieu Samphan several times when he accompanied Samdech Sihanouk on his trips to Kandal, to Takeo, to Kompong Cham, and around Phnom Penh. So my question is, therefore, did you say this to the investigators? And then can you clarify what you intended to say then, because you said to the chamber that you had only seen them together once?
Let me clarify this point. Actually, I saw him several times, but I saw him clearly only once. But I heard most of the time from my colleagues, but I was not sure when they told me. The only times I saw him clearly was when I met him. Actually, if I heard it from my colleagues, I did not pay much attention to it, because I know that the leaders had to go anywhere in a secretive manner, and I did not pay attention to it. So many times in this sense, I refer to the times when I heard from my colleagues, but I only saw him once. Many times in this sense, I meant Mr. Khieu Samphan might have been on several visits accompanying Samdech Sihanouk there. If you want to know it precisely, you can ask Mr. Khieu Samphan. If I got it wrong, then you can always ask him for clarification. And many times in this sense was that my colleagues who were working with me at the time told me that he went out with Prince Norodom Sihanouk then. But when I saw it only once, he was accompanying Samdech Sihanouk in the car, and I saw him from the distance by my own eye. But if you want to check the veracity of this, you can ask him. If Mr. Khieu Samphan says no, it was not the case, then I cannot protest, but that's what I saw at the time. And many times here, once again, it was not the times when he accompanied Samdech Sihanouk. I said I saw him by accident. I did not understand his travel itinerary on a daily basis. I never knew that, but I only saw him accidentally. I hope that I made myself clear.
Thank you, witness. Well, just to make myself clear, my aim is to clarify what you said, because there are documents in which you make certain statements, and since you are the person who was questioned, it is through you that we can obtain clarification. So thank you, therefore, for your clarification. You, therefore, explained that it was through your colleagues that you knew that Khieu Samphan was accompanying Prince Sihanouk in the surroundings of Phnom Penh. So my question is the following. Earlier, when you answered the civil party lawyer, you said, and I will quote from my notes, that the leaders, you were speaking about your reporting. You said that the leaders would only send you to places where there was enough to eat. And when you say, and the leaders, who are you speaking about? Who are you referring to? This is my first question of clarification.
The leaders in this sense refer to the leaders in the upper authority and the leader at the middle level authority. The cadres at the lower level were also the leaders in the middle rank, but we refer to them generally as the leaders. Actually, they were in the leadership level, but leaders were the one who supervised the work of others. They led the activities of others.
Very concretely speaking, in your particular case, when you were told to go to such and such a zone, who was the person who provided you with directions?
During the democratic Cambodia, there was only one person. Madame Jun Jat was the only person who gave direction.
And do you know clearly who would order her, give her directions?
Generally, work permit was issued by a separate ministry. It was not within the responsibility of our ministry. But if it was down below the structure of the ministry, the leader of that ministry may issue an authorization. But if you want to go to different zones, you had to seek approval from the ministry that issued the permit. And I had to seek approval from the minister of the ministry as well. I could not simply ask for authorization from my direct superior. And our team, the writing team, was a separate team which was equipped with more materials. But in terms of the management of this team, it was rather autonomous. We were separate from others, but we were part of Office K25, close to the office of the minister. So normally when there was any request, we did not go through the department. Instead, we had to go to the minister directly. But the head of the department knew where we would be going as well at the time.
Thank you for this clarification, but my question was, you would be receiving orders from UNIAT, but did you know who would give orders to UNIAT? If you don't know, no problem. I just want to know if you know that, if you know who gave orders to UNIAT.
I knew that there was a ministry high above who gave the direction, but I did not know. I only knew within the framework of my ministry. I knew that the work within the ministry, but as for other management or leadership at the upper level, I did not know.
Thank you for this clarification. In order to make sure that I understand correctly what you said about the statement that I referred to, and you spoke about Kyosampan's trips with Prince Sihanouk, were Kandal, Takeo, and Kampong Cham places where you were allowed to go for your journalistic missions?
And then as a matter of fact, I was entitled to go to cover the activities because our ministry had the portfolio of propaganda and education, so we would be able to go to cover the story during the trip, but we had to seek approval from our upper authority first.
My question, witness, mirrors what you said this morning to my colleague from the civil parties, and you were saying that the leaders would only send you to places where there was enough to eat. So my question was Kandal, Takeo, and Kampong Cham, were they among these places where there was enough to eat?
My personal feeling at that time was that in any province across the country, there was no question about the shortage of food. People would have sufficient food to eat, because at that time I was living in Phnom Penh, and rarely did I encounter the starvation. And I assume that there were plenty of food in the country. And when later on I discovered that there was a serious shortage of food or starvation, then I could hardly believe myself. That's why I made it in that statement earlier on. But later on, I heard time and again about the hard labor, the shortage of food, starvation, and things like that. But wherever I went, normally there was the opening ceremony, inauguration ceremony of a certain work site, and then I thought that everything was fine. I would never imagine that people were starving. And wherever I went, I only saw that people had food to eat. They had sufficient food. They had also other, had vegetable, rice, and meat, like the situation in Phnom Penh. So my feeling at the time is that there was no starvation at all, but I could well imagine that it would not be too plentiful anyway.
This is the last point I would like to bring up regarding your work as a journalist. And I'm referring again to your statement before the OCIJ, the same. So this again is document E3 380, and this is at the beginning of the paragraph. You said that over a period of 3 years, Sampan took charge of transporting supplies to the different regions and zones. And when you were answering Judge Lavernier's questions, I understood that you had received this information from indirectly from third parties. So can you tell us who informed you about Sampan's activities regarding the transport of supplies to different regions and to different zones?
Actually, I had a nephew who worked either with Sampon or other leaders. And some of my relatives were working in the Department of Transport. So they knew what Mr. Sampon had to do. For example, if there were requests from the regions or sectors or zones, and then they would know that information. For example, if there was a request from the zone for clothes or food or so, then they would know. I learned that information indirectly. But as for Sampon, whenever there were requests from the zones, they would organize in order to accommodate them. But anyway, I did not know the truth behind that. I only heard it indirectly from others. But in my assessment, I saw that it was true. But I did not witness it myself. But I learned this information from a very reliable people. Because whenever there was transport of food supplies and stuff like that, they always prepares the convoys of trucks carrying food stuff and everyday stuff as well. And we could see it, the car or the trucks carrying those items. And I explained earlier on about the items being transported out of Phnom Penh. I said very clearly earlier that those items could either reach the people or the targeted location, or they might not have reached those targeted locations. There were reasons, I know, behind why it did not reach the location. Because at that time, the transport of those items were in large numbers, and we could see many trucks, even those that we cannot compare to the present day's transport of items due to the fact that now we have bigger lorries and things like that. But at the times, we could see that the items were being transported to the country.
Et, Monsieur le témoin, ma
Witness, this is going to be my last question since we are coming to the end of today's hearings. Can you give us the names of the persons who talked of Mr. Sampan's activities? You made mention of a nephew. Can you give us his name?
Response. My nephew was by the person by the name Allah.
Monsieur le témoin, je vous remercie d'avoir...
Witness, thank you for patiently answering my questions. I've come to the end of my examination. Thank you, Mr. President.
The President, thank you, Counsel. Thank you, Mr. Witness. The hearing comes to a conclusion today. The next session will be resumed tomorrow by 9 a.m. For tomorrow's session, the Chamber continues to hear testimony of Mr. Kum Won, questions continue to be put by another defense team for Mr. Nunchi and also Mr. Ingsari's counsel. Mr. Kamwun, please be advised that your testimony has not yet been complete and the chamber would like to hear your testimony tomorrow as well. Court officer is now instructed to assist with the Western unit to ensure that Mr. Witness is properly accommodated and have him return to the courtroom tomorrow before 9 a.m. Security personnel are now instructed to bring all the 3 accused persons back to the detention facility and have them return to the courtroom by 9 a.m. The court is adjourned.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ